Hello and welcome to Talking Automotive with Mark and John. My name is John Sinclair and my co-host Mark Palavestra.
Hi John. Today we have got a fascinating subject for our listeners. We actually talk about product management and product planning. This is the fundamental of the 4 Ps. So product, price, place and promotion. Often we look at the place, promotion and the price and forget how much work actually goes into the product planning and the lead time it takes to get the product you're selling right now to market with the right features for customers to actually enjoy and purchase.
Yeah, this is really a great podcast because Maz explains the complexity to bring a product to market and all the difficulties that go into it and how his software can help in that space. So really a great listen.
If you like what you hear today, remember to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Spotify and iTunes. Ring the bell on YouTube and you'll get updates for when new episodes are released.
Let's jump into it.
With 30 years' experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, Precar Fleet Services is an independent division of Precar Services, offering specialty fleet fit-outs for commercial applications ranging from simple tray and tow bar fitments to fully bespoke service body and accessory installation. With quality-assured safety, compliance and standardisation of vehicle builds, Precar Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies, and original equipment manufacturers. For further information on how Precar Fleet Services can assist in solving your commercial vehicle fit-out needs, please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
Modera is a cloud-based, AI-powered CRM and retail platform aimed at digitizing the physical process of selling a car. The Modera platform sits between existing automotive dealer and OEM systems, providing car dealerships a quick and easy shift to digital ways of working, all done entirely digitally and with total ease.
Hi Maziar, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. Maybe just to start, can you tell us about Gocious and what space you're operating in at the moment?
Thank you for having me, John, Mark. So we are, I guess you can say, startup, but we've been around since 2018, 2019. And we focus in product management, specifically in product roadmaps. And we want to provide a digital dashboard for specifically manufacturing industry to take advantage of more flexible and agile methods for introducing, their products in the future, but specifically to have alignment and have transparency in their organization at the leadership and the connecting leadership to the rest of the organization, with product management being in the center. So this is all about the future of the products, but bringing everybody together to get consensus and to be in the know on what needs to get built and why going forward.
So a question for me on that, because a big challenge in automotive is because there's such long lead times, is trying to get the volumes right from what was the planned volume, the capacity of the market, because things change in the market, but it doesn't always seem to reflect back in the factory. So the factory's churning these volumes out, but I don't know if there's ever a measure of accountability saying, well, that's what we set out and that's what we've achieved. And how close is it to what's happening and how can we adapt that?
Well, there's two parts to that. One is this about the products that are currently being manufactured and it's already being released, and that's an operational thing that and a fine tuning and optimization exercise to make sure that they have the proper information to get information, let's say from the dealers or from the market and from competition, to be able to have this churn in a timely manner and kind of optimize on a daily basis. The second part is longer term view, which is, okay, we need to change the factory and change our supply lines because we want to produce the next generation of the cars. But we need to understand, is it worth producing that car? How much do we have to produce, let's say, year 1 and year 2 and so on and so forth? So what is the demand in general for that kind of product? So those I would separate the two. One requires near real-time data as best as possible from various sources to be churned, because every month potentially they want to fine-tune. The latter is the case where, as I mentioned, executive leadership and the business side of things would sit together with designers and engineers to see what new innovations are in the docket and how much value or demand it has in the market, and to be able to prioritize those to make sure that does get incorporated in the next generation of the vehicles, and it has proper forecasting to jumpstart the vehicle in the market. For example, if European Union comes and says no more, cars with fossil fuels in there by 2035, then there has to be a clear path to get there. And the demand for fossil fuel would dramatically drop as a result. So if the factory doesn't move and doesn't make the necessary changes, then you're going to be in a bit of a trouble in Europe after 2035. So those are the two things. But in today, we have, for example, chip shortage, and you need to see how you can kind of adjust and see what does that mean to the demand. If you take a piece out, you need research and study, but you need that short term and real time.
Actually, Maziar, this is an area that is such a critical piece that I think most people in the industry are not aware. Everyone seems to look at what new model is coming out this week without really understanding those horizons and the lead times that you're talking about, because it really starts in that long term. And the whole product planning process is so involved. I'm keen, I suppose, before we jump into the software solution side of it, but you touched on that journey. So here we are, we're using the EU's situation of fossil fuels. But even if we look at a current model right now that's being released today, the lead time for that from a product planning perspective, what are we talking about? We're talking about, is it 6 or 7 years ago that journey started? And what components come into play to start that process?
Yeah, so depending on the change that you require, it can go up to 10 to 11 years. So for example, if you need a completely new platform, that happens rarely, and car companies try not to make it happen. But if it happens, then yes, the journey starts 10 to 11 years, and it's a massive investment. And you can see, because of the shift to EV, almost every car company has to start thinking about new platforms. So it does require everybody coming together. And that's one of the reasons when I think personally that when Tesla was able to prove that this is a viable solution in the market, every other car company had to scramble to give platforms out, because it's not an easy thing to do to bring new platforms to the market. But assuming the platform is in place, now you are thinking a horizon anywhere between 6 months to 5 years. So, if there's a small feature, or there's a feature that, let's say it's available in, meaning all the parts and all the designs, everything's ready, and it's available in Australia, just not in the United States, you can potentially, in some cases, in 6 months, get it into US and implement it. So that the IP, the knowledge, the supply lines is available. The product manager says, we just need whatever Australia has here in the United States. So that would shorten, but this needs design, testing, more extensive work, then it can go up to 5 years, even for a component to get ready and come to the market.
So there's lots of moving parts here. So I suppose just for the audience to get an understanding of product planning. I know, John, you've been involved in product planning. I've had some exposure to it from a sales and marketing perspective. So there's a lot of moving parts here. We're talking designers first, engineers, but then there's how do you then turn this design and engineering concept into something that you can produce and make it cost effective, but also still monitoring what the market is doing from a demand perspective. So you may have been designing an amazing sedan or a saloon, but suddenly the market's gone SUV. Or suddenly pickups become the go when you can forget about a two-door coupe because no one buys them anymore. But you've spent all this money and amortizing all this cost. So getting it right and getting that cost down is a critical element in having a competitive advantage. and also getting faster to market with the design and the product. So I suppose I'm keen to understand, so how then does the software work to coordinate all these elements?
That's where I think we're embarking on a very exciting new chapter in manufacturing in general, but automotive in the industry. A lot of people are focused on the fact that the cars are moving towards EV and all that. But fact of the matter is this change is also to some extent has made it possible for disruption in the market. There are new car manufacturers coming into the surface with some good levels of success. And they're completely introducing new ways of approaching hardware products, in this case, automotive, on how it gets manufactured. And I think I don't want to call it a complete wake-up call, but it's moving the automotive industry, which had their glory days in operational efficiency with total quality management, total quality control, lean, practices. And then it kind of started becoming repetitive on the same thing. So they kept building on that. There was no disruption or major change. Now you see this starting, and it's a very exciting phase, I think, because it gives the opportunity to make those capital investments simply because you need to change the car anyway. You have to build completely different cars now. And what I mean by that is the introduction of software. But to give you a better picture, up to now, if you purchased your car, let's say you would keep it anywhere 3 years to 8 years, you would use that car. If that car, trim set aside, didn't have the features you liked, or a feature would come out next year, you had to sell your car, get another car. That was how it worked. Then later, some advancements came. You could take your car to the dealer, make some adjustment, but that came with a cost, and it was not convenient. You had to take it, and still a lot of car companies work that way. I don't think a lot of people, some car enthusiasts will, but not a lot of people would buy the car, then keep taking it to the dealer and then searching for features and then saying, I want that one, keep investing in the car. But now today, the design of the car from the outset is done. So everything happens on hardware, just like your laptop. And once you put those hardware into your car, then you can change the behavior of the product. And essentially changing the product becomes just a platform for you to, use it and change it the way you need it. I don't think two laptops in this world look alike, except for their outer shell. But when you open it up, your laptop, my laptop, different applications, even those applications are configured different. So I think eventually the car would go more and more towards that. You can see signs of it, for example, in Tesla, where you're sleeping, you press a button, you wake up, your car does autonomous driving. They say, I haven't driven it, but that's what's happened. So, and I think that this is a completely different product. This is just not the same thing, overnight. And it's very easy for you. You don't have to go out of your way. It's subscription-based, so you don't have to go take a loan to make this happen. You're going on a recurring subscription. So the whole car as a product, I think, is going to the next level. And the reason for that is now possible is the combination of software and the applications of the software, but also the supporting logistics. So data centers and internet and pushing the software to the car is now all at the stage of maturity that it makes it possible for these products to now come to the market.
I just can't get understanding. So the vehicles will have the features built into them, or the capability, if you like. It's a matter of now dialing in through a subscription to say, right, if I get a standard trim Model X vehicle, and it's got the nice seats and etc., but it doesn't have maybe some of the higher end features. I'll be really basic and say it's got climate control, but I want heated seats front and rear, and I want some extra anti-collision features. But that's the next spec up. I can buy the vehicle at the standard spec, but then I can go in, pay a subscription, and suddenly my car then becomes specified to the next level up. So those applications then get turned on. So now my vehicle, I don't have to take it to the dealership. It's now working at a higher level, higher specification, and I'm just paying an extra dollars per week, dollars per month to do so.
Because if you think about it, new innovations historically, new innovations that come in the cars in a relatively short time become, if they're good innovations, they become standard on the car. That's how the car cycle works. Today, if a car doesn't have a rear view camera, everybody's like, what's wrong with that producer? Right? But 10 years ago, they're like, what? I can see the rear from a TV camera? That's crazy. So that's how cars work. So if you come up with a new innovation, it is better to put all those sensors or all those gadgets in your car, because it's just the hardware itself is cheap. It's the software that turns it on and makes it work. But you got to design the car that way to make that hardware cheap and not have all the bells and whistles that does all the sensors and make the sensors command and control systems generic for the car. And then you can send software to change the behavior. That way you're reducing the cost of controls, and the controls are standard. It goes everywhere in the car, the wires. And so it's just a matter of putting the right software in place to kind of change the behavior of the car. It's kind of like the motherboard of a laptop. Once you build the motherboard, it can't do anything. Change the chip, you can improve it, add memory, whatever you want to do, and the software keeps fueling it. It doesn't take much after that to bring new capabilities to your laptop.
It's very interesting. It's quite fascinating, because that's a complete change from where we're sitting at the moment.
What's important is it's a different thought process, but once all the pieces are in place, the manufacturer is able to, if they can put the thought process and this new mindset in place, plus the infrastructure. So they have to have means to write the software, have the hardware design, and push the software even after it goes out of the factory. The world of the car is not done by far. You're continuously pushing new capabilities to the vehicle. If that structure is in place, I think it started, but it would pick up faster. And I think it's a revolution. It's not just a minor improvement. It's a completely pivot on how car design and the development life cycle is managed as a whole.
And in terms of SaaS, cloud-based software solutions, how do they support automotive companies achieve their production targets? How does it actually work?
So that's where the trick is. So the issue is this. So software teams are used to new methodologies for managing, developing the software development lifecycle, took all its ideas from hardware development lifecycle in the 80s. Then they took those ideas from Lean, from even tools like Kanban. They took all these, and then they put it in place, and then they improved on it. So now you have large teams that are able to work in coordination and push changes extremely rapidly and fast. And it's because of this thought process. So if you think about it in Amazon or in Microsoft's data centers, nobody goes in that data center anymore and racks up a server or wires things together. You're sitting at your desk, you press a button, the server virtually comes up and starts working for you. So all this has happened because of these advancements in the way the software teams build their software, which they took their ideas from manufacturing. However, manufacturing hasn't moved fast to modernize these processes. So I think with more and more software teams coming into factories, because they need them, right? So these manufacturers or OEM providers, not the factory itself, but the manufacturers and OEM providers, it'll change little by little the culture and the way cars are built or designed. So imagine software teams are going to come and say, hey, every month I want to, or every month or 2 months, or even every 2 weeks, I want to send down a correction. I want to upgrade the car. I want to make changes. And then on the other side, you have people who say, great, 10 gates, 55, movements and tests and designs in nth detail. And on this side, they're like, what are you talking about? Automate everything. What 10 gates? Everything should just happen automatically. and we should just keep pushing everything. So more and more automation would come in. So the time to market is going to start shrinking as a result, and changes to the products, even after they're produced, you're going to probably see them more rapidly.
So where do you see the future of product road mapping? So you mentioned before, so there's this transition from the auto industry, the old Kanban system, and you're right, there was that whole, the auto industry became very efficient in the 80s because it had to. So I think the Japanese were really putting a lot of pressure on the Europeans, the US automakers as well, to really get the product costs down and develop the products. But you're right, it was very much about just refine and add some additional hardware, and that's what was happening with the vehicles: new hardware, and it quickly became standard. So that was like, who could find the next new hardware to add to the vehicle? Even with your engines, how can we just, this engine's been around for 50 years, but we just tweak it a bit more, or we put a fuel injector on it, or we put a catalytic converter to make it more environmentally friendly. But now we're talking serious disruption. So where do you see with this right now? There's some serious transitions happening here in the industry, the types of vehicles, the type of fuels, the autonomous, the connected cars, etc. I'm just keen to get understanding of with the product road mapping and how you see it affecting customers and also auto manufacturers. If
you think about it, the picture I painted, which I don't know if I painted it, that's what's happening. But the fact is that it requires much more rapid decision making. Change becomes normal. Every week there's new information about what market conditions are, and that change can be acted on. In other words, if today you put a camera in the car, you realize people don't want rear view camera, what are you going to do? It's already there, right? But tomorrow you say, well, don't send that software. Maybe we can send the software so the rear view camera turns into side view camera because we can widen the angle, for example, right? So you can make decisions much more rapidly and make corrections and have a little room or more room to make mistakes and correct those mistakes. So if you have the staff and the resources, you can take action and do something about it. In the old days, you couldn't. You had to wait for another year to make that correction. So what that means is that the people who are coming together to make decisions on the roadmap or to make changes to that roadmap, if before they had 6 months' time and they met once every quarter, now they might choose to meet once a month, if not more. And they want accurate information to make decisions and make adjustments on their products, maybe not for next year, but maybe for the next month and the month after and 3 months after that. So you see the time is starting to collapse and crunch. So for that, you need tools. You need better ways to come together, to make decisions, to understand, what the situation on the grounds are or what market is, and to be able to immediately align and then send that information back to the team so they can take action. And I think that is today, communication happens partly on these Zoom and these kind of forums, but it's all PowerPoints coming together. Information is not always standard. Putting these roadmaps together is quite complex, and getting agreement from a vast number of people requires a lot of touch points. And if this information was in one place and it had the right tools for people to make the changes and come together immediately, you're collapsing that time and you're not becoming the bottleneck to unleash this potential in manufacturing world.
Question for me is, product managers are having challenges with their supply chain at the moment, supply chain shortages. And we're also seeing, I think you mentioned earlier, that the whole electrification, that some governments are banning ICE engines in certain markets from a specific date. What are some of the things that product managers can do to alleviate these shortages and also move their whole product range across to electrification?
There's two things. When it comes to product management itself, product managers usually work on longer horizon at the moment, and they're looking ahead of time. So if they know that the chip issue is not going to get resolved in the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, the best thing to do is to find out what are the essential features and capabilities of a car that needs the chip and to kind of park everything else, but also to work now for the next generation of the car. Because in 4 years, this problem is going to go away. But the way the problem is going to go away is not that the supplier is going to come back on the old chips in the levels that we like. That's not how the problem should be solved. The problem should be solved by building new factories and building new chips for the future. And that should become the right supply. Chip is not something that's stationary. It's continuously evolving. So if you have a gap, you've missed this generation of chips. So you got to start planning for the next generation, securing the next generation of that chip. And for lack of a better term, you have to jump the technology. And for that reason, the product managers have to have that horizon to say, okay, this one we compromise, but the next one is going to come even better. And we're going to jump on that bandwagon in the future. Kind of to give you an analogy, as an example, in one country that I, in my previous life, visited, we were working to see how we can get them internet access. But the country didn't have enough infrastructure at the time, and they didn't have enough fiber in some of the rural areas. And when we spoke we actually ended up speaking with the minister. The country is small. We talked to the Minister of Communication. He said, we jumped the technology. We have now towers and wireless everywhere, that some of them are even better than some of the most developed countries, simply because it was just too expensive for us to put fiber. The minute the wireless systems came, we started putting towers everywhere. And that's a good example of what product managers have to think about, saying, okay, if we've missed this, we're going to control the situation, but we're going to be ahead, in 2 years when this problem is going away with much better chips, much better. We're going to secure our supplies for that longer term, because this short term, I don't think it's going to go away. It just requires a lot of capital investment to fix this bottleneck at the moment.
So, Maz, I'm just keen to now just get back to the software that you've got. So the software, correct me if I'm wrong, helps the product manager. Does it collect data from a whole heap of different inputs and then helps the product manager, you see that as a dashboard, and helps them make informed decisions about A, the trends, and B, the statuses of each of the projects. So it combines inputs, but then puts a framework together for them to follow, almost like a bouncing ball, if you like. That, okay, if this equals this equals this, have we got input from engineering, got input from design, the market's telling us this. So there's a long-term view. So this is what, and I really love your description about jumping the chip shortage, because you're right, you can't just chase your tail in the short term only. There has to be one eye down the road and one eye making sure we don't crash into something at the end of the bonnet. But if we're only looking at the end of the bonnet, we're going to miss what's happening down the road. And there may be a turn-off that we're going to miss. So it's a real complex role here, and you've got to, obviously there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of stakeholders. So your software brings all those people and helps that alignment for those that are looking close at the end of the bonnet as to what we're going to crash into now, but also those that are looking at, well, we're actually on a journey to Santa Fe, so we want to make sure we're on the right road, because that's where everybody wants to go. So there's a real challenge of all these different moving parts, but your software makes that easier and gives that organisation a competitive advantage. Now, that could be an OEM, it could be a manufacturer of a component that supplies to an OEM. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, so to give you an example, you can also use this product. So let's say you're an OEM and you're producing a car, and the car has, let's say, transmission, tires, and engine. But you work very closely with the supplier of the engine. Maybe you're not producing the engine or the transmission. But you want to know exactly the status and the capabilities that will go into that engine and transmission as it's moving through its process. So you can give them access and let those teams give input on how the engine is moving along. Now, let's say you have 10 different lines of products, and out of those 10 engines to be ready for them with certain capabilities. The important thing is that you have the suppliers or the people who are working with you on, let's say, the engine. They can provide you quicker status as opposed to maybe meeting once a month to see how the engine is going. If there is an issue, they immediately will report to you. Now, if that engine is being used in multiple product lines, you would know if a capability is going to be delayed or there's an issue with the capability and the product manager has to step in and rescope or change the scope. You now know the impact on all your products, that are coming to the market, because you know where it's going to be used and when those products are scheduled to go to production. So you have these dependencies. You can collaborate with other product managers in other organizations to kind of bring the whole product together and get better information as a result.
This is the gold, John, when I think of back to our marketing 101, the 4 Ps. The first P is product. And it's something that the industry takes for granted because everyone sees the end of the line. They don't realise how much work goes into achieving and creating that product before we worry about the promotion, the pricing and the distribution of it. But often it's just the product and distribution and the price that we look at, but how much work goes into the product. And if the product's wrong, as Maz was saying, you're looking at a product that was planned 10 years ago. So if you get it wrong 10 years ago, you're stuck with a product that you need to sell, because we've got the product life cycles are usually at least another 5 to 8 years to amortize the cost of that. You can be almost out of business if you get it wrong in a catastrophic way. And then you just do the fine tweaking of the marketing mix to optimize it. But if your product's fundamentally wrong, then you're out of market for a long time, or you're really struggling. So this is a really critical element of the 4 Ps.
Maz, in terms of your software, can it apply across other industries? Can you do, for instance, construction equipment or agricultural equipment? What industries are you targeting, and where do you hope to achieve your biggest success?
We currently see the most value in OEMs that do have products that gets platformed. In other words, you have components that come together and you can reconfigure those components in different ways to produce different variations of the same product or different products altogether. So you're taking advantage of a lot of shared components, and you have teams independently working, but you have to bring them together, and you got to keep check on all these teams. So yes, industrial machinery is a very good example of it. Automotive, aerospace. You also have medical devices. They all come, they have to bring all these components together, and they have a lot of product lines. It's kind of, I don't know if it's an easy, good analogy, but we call it many to many. So you have many components, many products, and they're a matrix. They're crisscrossing each other. And you have to always keep tab of how the modules are coming together. Is it in line with the product? Is product falling behind or going to it? So you're just constantly trying to of whether you're efficient and whether there is any issues in delivering on that efficiency. It's something that we're passionate about. So we get excited when we talk about it. We see the world, a new chapter in the manufacturing industry opening, and we're just excited to write it and contribute the best we can to this. And so we're always listening, and we're contributing to the industry, either through Just Knowledge or through our platform. We're just a bunch of people that are passionate about this.
This is, for me, the fundamentals that a lot of people in the auto industry are not aware of. Unless you've actually worked in product planning or worked with product planners, the horizons are so often forgotten about because it's very much about a here and now. It's a today transaction, or at best it's a monthly horizon, and that's it. So I think it's very powerful that you covered off the two elements there, because one, it's the cornerstone, as I mentioned before, the cornerstone of the 4 Ps. So product, price, promotion and place. If the product's fundamentally wrong, and it takes 10 years to get to this point today, if you get that wrong, if you get the timing wrong when you bring that product, you might have created the most amazing product that was perfect for 10 years ago, but it's not necessarily right for today. Like suddenly if you created the best V8 engine for today, but you've thought about it 10 years ago, well, you're in a lot of trouble, because if all of your business was predicated around just doing a V8 engine, as much as we love our V8s, don't get me wrong, I adore them, but we know that that's not going to be the main volume. So you really have to have all that data coming in. And you mentioned before, and I think it's a really critical point, is alignment. The larger the organisation, the more silos that you get, and you get elements that want to champion their own cause. So designers want to design amazing things that can't be built. Engineers want to rationalise designs so that they can be made, but they're not sexy. But then the production teams want it to be even simpler again so they can make it and not have to have the quality issues, because they're going to cop it in the neck from a quality perspective. So you've got all these competing elements, and then the marketers want to have something that's really cool, and the sales guys just want to have stuff that's going to sell and make money and make it easy to sell without giving away too much discount, because the finance guys don't want that to happen either. So the finance guys want to hold back the investment in the design and the engineering because they want it to be as cost effective as possible. So you've got all these competing elements happening, and you need some sort of process to bring all those elements together so they're all aligned and they can see it, and speaking with data and then having a plan. So it's the data and the plan and the structure from a software perspective that brings them together so that certain elements can say, hey, we should actually do this because this is what the market is telling us from this research, the inputs from the customers and the deals are telling us this. The government policy is saying that for this many years from now. So with this and this and this, we need to arrive at this point, which means we need these guys to do this, this, and this by this date, and these guys to do that by that date. We'll then reconfigure it and say, right, are we on the right path? We need to engage these stakeholders, these subcontractors to get these parts, because that's what we need to achieve this vehicle. And by the way, it's got to be safe, it's got to be environmentally friendly, and it's got to be sexy enough to sell. So all of these challenges are getting twisted and turned all the time because it's a dynamic environment. And how you have a competitive advantage is that you have a tool like yours that makes you faster and better than your competition. So if you can be faster and better, you will win. And that's the key, if you match to the customer. So you need your software to actually do that, to be ahead of the game versus the competitors. Because if you go back to what the industry was good in the 80s, which was just add some extra hardware along the way, eventually someone's going to catch up with you very quickly and pass you. So, you mentioned a really good point about the chip shortages. If you're just reconfiguring your production for the current state of chip shortages, you're going to miss the boat for the next one. So you need to jump ahead. It's a bit like what happens in the Formula One teams. If you're suddenly out of market now, you've got to think of 3 years from now, start working on your engine for 3 years' time, because your engine now, if you've missed the boat that you designed 5 years ago, no point wasting too much time on it now. Get the next engine ready to win the next wave of Formula One races.
Exactly.
So that's what you've got to do, and that's why your software is so powerful. But I like the fact that you've got both ways. You've got the long term, but you've got the short term as well, because it's the here and now. What can we build into the car? You mentioned about the laptop analogy. Build all the hardware in, make it cost efficient because you put it in all the cars, and then have that subscription model that you can then turn off and on elements so that the customer will keep their car, but you can actually make more money out of the same car. You don't just make money out of selling it once. You make money out of turning on the features. So suddenly that customer has, for the journey of that car, is actually buying more from you. So you then have a better customer experience, but you're doing that with the view that your software is telling you what people want. And then you can fine tune what you can do with the product and say, hey, given we've got these sensors and these outputs, can we add this feature through, because the car's connected now, can we upgrade the car and make some money out of the existing car park without having them to come in? What a beautiful customer experience that is. So that gives you another competitive advantage. So it really makes sense for OEMs and component suppliers, machinery manufacturers as well, because machinery is a big element of this too. Your software can apply to so many elements across the auto industry and its ecosystem, but also in allied industries like defence and in other elements that you talked about with the medical equipment, etc. as well. So there's so many applications, and it makes sense for people to have a conversation with you to see how they can be ahead of the game and beat their competitors.
In terms of the sales of your product now, where are you at?
We're actually launched the software, and we're going to actually, the first summit we're going is Monday. We're going to set up for medical device manufacturing summit, and then we're going to Detroit for an automotive summit. And then later, we're adding some features that then we can promote our product to not just manufacturing, but in general software community or service and hardware community, but larger software where, as I mentioned, you have teams coming together to build a bigger software. And they have to coordinate amongst each other. So we plan to introduce that in Florida in late November. So we have kind of back to back where we're going and promoting. But currently our software is out. We're selling very, to a small number, and we have a couple of people we're working, or outfits we're working, one in industrial machinery also, that they're helping us fine tune it, and they're using it either in trial or they're actually using it, and they're our customers, and we're constantly getting feedback from them too.
Wow. This, John, has been a fantastic conversation. Maz, really thank you for coming on the show, because opens my eyes, and I've been around a couple of years. John, keen for your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I really enjoyed it. So it's a really interesting aspect, and especially quite really new, and I think it's going to lead the way for the future. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. Hopefully you got as much out of the conversation as we did with Maz. That was an absolute eye-opener from a product management, product planning perspective, and product bringing to market. If you like what you heard, please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. Ring the bell on YouTube so you get notified for when we release a new episode.
Thanks very much for listening.